Yo, what's good everyone? Week 5 of the NFL season is here, and today we're going to be taking a first look at this Sunday DraftKings main slate. What I'm going to do here today is go position by position and talk about the plays that are sticking out to me here early on in the week. And then to wrap up today's video, we'll put together a first look cash lineup and a first look tournament lineup. With that being said, let's dive into it here. And like we always do, we're going to kick things off here with the quarterbacks. You notice we got Josh and Jalen right at the top once again, and rightfully so. These guys have been great all year long. I know Jalen Hurts kind of had a down week last week, but still put up 17 DraftKings points. Really didn't have to throw the ball all that much in this game. Was kind of sloppy weather conditions. I'll go right back to him or Josh Allen in my cash lineup this week. I suspect we're going to see those two towards the top pretty much all year long. Now, on the other side of that game between Arizona and Philadelphia, I do think Kyler is an interesting tournament play here. Don't love the $7,400 price tag, but a guy who's got 25, 30 plus DraftKings point upside, albeit a tough matchup here against that Philadelphia defense, which is very good. Probably not one I'm going to be targeting much this year, but I think that game in general has a lot of high scoring upside and shootout potential, so I'll definitely be diving more into that as the week progresses. I think Justin Herbert is fine there at $7,100, especially if Keenan Allen comes back, but the next quarterback that's really sticking out to me here is Tom Brady at $6,000. Wasn't super productive in weeks 1 through 3. You can see there off to the right-hand side. Really came to life on the fantasy side of things last week against Kansas City. Damn near threw for 400 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Albeit they were playing from behind that entire game, it certainly helps as well that he pretty much has a healthy core of wide receivers now too. Chris Godwin saw 10 targets last week, and helps that Mike Evans is back from suspension. That is a divisional game there against Atlanta, so even if they get out to an early lead, I foresee them keeping their foot on the pedal in this game, especially considering they're 2-2 right now and not 4-0. It'd be a little different situation if they were 4-0, but I think they come out guns a-blazing in that game against Atlanta. Scrolling down here in the 5K range, I do think Trevor Lawrence is interesting here against Houston, as well as Jameis Winston. If he does return and is healthy, I kind of like this Saints offense in general. They're all very affordable. We'll talk about both Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, and even Chris Olave here in just a little bit, but $5,500, not very expensive for a guy that can go for 25, 30 DraftKings points in the right environment. And I like that the Saints are playing here at home against Seattle, whose defense is not very good. Now moving over here to the running backs, and there's a lot to like about the running back position on the tournament side of things here for week 5. But nothing really popping out to me here early on the week on the cash side of things. I'm definitely going to have to dive into that deeper as the week progresses, but I got a handful of guys here that I definitely think are interesting for tournaments this week. First, Christian McCaffrey, I'll probably be avoiding that against San Francisco. Derrick Henry does look interesting here against Washington, and I actually think we can consider him in cash, just looking at his volume here over the past 2 weeks. Notoriously not a guy who gets involved in the passing game, and we saw that in weeks 1 and 2. Completely different story here in weeks 3 and 4, 6 and 5 targets, 20 plus rushing attempts, scoring a touchdown in his last 3 games. If he's going to be getting 5 targets a game at $8,200, I think we need to be considering him in cash. I don't know if that's going to be a role that sticks going forward. Again, it notoriously hasn't for Derrick Henry, but I think Tennessee is realizing they just need to get him the ball more in general, especially with someone like A.J. Brown now out of there playing in Philadelphia. Get your best players the ball, and Derrick Henry is the best player for them on the offensive side of things. Nick Chubb and Austin Eckler, both really decent matchups there against one another. For sure, tournament considerations, and I even think Nick Chubb is in that cash conversation now as well, but again, just lacks a role in the passing game, at least consistently. But man, those numbers do look good, and he's just one of the best pure rushers in the NFL, so $8,000, I don't know if it's quite a cash game consideration right now, but definitely on the tournament side of things. Same thing there with Austin Eckler. And Dalvin Cook, I'd love to play him in cash this week here, but again, just not a consistent role in the passing game here these last 2 weeks and really hasn't put up great numbers. Maybe this is a spot for him to break out at home here against the Chicago Bears, who are one of the worst teams in football. Now, I mentioned Alvin Kamara earlier when I was talking about Jameis Winston, just like the matchup for the Saints at home here against Seattle. We saw Detroit put up massive numbers against them last week. No reason to think that New Orleans can't do the same thing. It just comes down to, will these guys be healthy? Jameis sat last week against Minnesota. AK sat. Michael Thomas sat. Chris Olave is still healthy. We'll get into him during the wide receiver side of things, but if Kamara does play here, I do like this matchup. Now, he's been banged up here 2 out of the 4 weeks so far this year. Really hasn't done much on the fantasy side of things, but I do like that price of $6,600. And again, not to sound like a broken record, I do like the matchup. Jamal Williams is interesting here. I don't believe DeAndre Swift is going to be back this week. 20-plus rushing attempts here in each of the last 2 weeks. 19 last week will round up. Not heavily involved in the passing game, but this is the goal line back for Detroit. I don't know how much they're going to get down towards the goal line or red zone in New England here. You know, Bill Belichick, one of the best game schemers in the NFL. They're probably going to do things to shut down this Detroit offense, but hard to argue the numbers here for Jamal Williams, and a decent price there of $6,500. Now, again, a handful of guys here that I like on the tournament side of things this week. James Robinson is interesting against Houston, although him and Travis Etienne did start to split carries a little bit last week. That very well could have been game script dependent, playing from behind against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Dameon Pierce is interesting here on the other side of that game. Had a long touchdown last week. I believe he's 3rd in the NFL right now, or 4th, with yards after contact. Looking really good here for a rookie. 18 and 29 DraftKings points here in back-to-back weeks, and more involved in the passing game last week as well. Really like to see that. Devin Singletary is another guy that sticks out to me here. You know, rushing attempts have never been something we've seen out of this Buffalo offense over the past few years with Josh Allen. Well, I guess Josh Allen runs the ball a lot, but the running backs, the volume always hasn't been there. But Singletary looks to be the lead back in an offense that can score a lot of points. You know, this Pittsburgh defense is banged up a little bit right now, missing TJ Watt, missing Ahkello Witherspoon last week, and so I like Buffalo in general this week, and Singletary could be someone that flies under the radar on the tournament side of things with 20-25 plus DraftKings point upside. Now, a handful of other guys here in the 5K range. Khalil Herbert sticks out to me. If he's going to be getting 20-plus rushing attempts per game, I think we need to consider him. Would like him to get a little more involved in the passing game, but Chicago just doesn't throw the ball in general. And then Ramondre Stevenson here is really interesting, going up against Detroit. I like the volume I've seen here in each of the past 2 weeks. Double-digit rushing attempts, 5-plus targets in each of those games. Could be a sneaky tournament play as well. And then Breece Hall, I'm even considering him in cash this week. 17 rushing attempts last week against Pittsburgh, playing more snaps in general, still remains a focal point in this offense on the passing side of things, even with the quarterback change from Flacco to Zach Wilson. And those numbers don't look bad at all for a guy priced at $5,400. Again, we're going for 3x value in our cash lineups. That's what, 15, 15.8, 16.2 DraftKings points for Breece Hall? Seems like he can get there, and that Miami defense has been susceptible at times this year as well. Outside of that, there's one more guy that's sticking out to me on the other side of that game, actually. I think Raheem Mostert here is going to have a big game sooner than later. You can see the rushing attempts are going up, a little bit involved in the passing game as well. No Tua this week, Teddy Bridgewater. They could just run the ball more in general. Raheem Mostert will definitely be in my tournament mix. Now, folks, before we dive into the wide receivers here, if you could take 10 seconds to like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Again, I got a lot of football content coming your way this year, and we are officially 1 week out from opening night here in the U.S. for the NHL. I couldn't be more excited for that. A lot of hockey content coming your way this year as well, both on the DFS side of things and betting side of things. So excited for that. I appreciate you all. Now let's dive into these wide receivers. And as always, there's a lot to love about the wide receiver position. You can see the top 4 guys here. I consider them a tier 1 play this week. Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson are very expensive, and Tough to get them in your tournament lineups at that price. They need to go for 35 plus DraftKings points at least in order to meet value. So I don't know if I'll go there on the tournament side of things. I think they are completely fine on the cash side of things. Steph Diggs definitely interesting here against Pittsburgh, especially if Akil Witherspoon does miss again here in week 5. He missed last week for what it's worth. But Tyreek Hill here, if he is going to get double-digit targets in this game against the Jets, who are one of the worst teams at stopping the pass this year, hard to ignore him at this price at $8,000. Maybe even on the cash side of things, and he's always a tournament play for me. But yeah, I kind of like Miami in general here this week. It is going to be Teddy Bridgewater, but both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill look pretty nice here once again. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown looks like he could be back this week, but just don't love that matchup going on the road playing against New England. But we have to talk about Hollywood Brown here. This guy has seen 39 targets in his last 3 games. 11, 17, and 11 again. And that's turned out to be some pretty nice DraftKings performances as well. 21 DraftKings points last week, 31 against the LA Rams. I talked about this when I was going through the quarterbacks. I like this game in general between Philadelphia and Arizona. I know that Philadelphia defense is legit, but this just could be a volume game where we see a lot of passes thrown and a lot of points scored. So I think I'll be on that game in general. Mike Williams, I like him against Cleveland there. CeeDee Lamb getting a lot of targets thrown his way with Cooper Rush. You can see there 11, 12, and 8. Turned out to be some pretty nice DraftKings performances as well. Don't love the matchup there against the LA Rams. I know the LA Rams defense has been susceptible this year, but he could get the Jalen Ramsey treatment, and I just don't know if I love that with Cooper Rush under center. But hey, he's got the volume, and that's what we're looking for in DFS. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, absolutely love those guys this week. I believe Chris Godwin is $5,900. There he is. We'll get to him here just a minute. Mike Evans played really well here on Sunday night. 10 targets in that game, scored 2 touchdowns, 33 DraftKings points. That's the type of upside you get out of a guy like Mike Evans, and I love that matchup against Atlanta. I think you could roll out Brady with both Evans and Godwin. That's affordable enough. And I don't think you need to run it back in that game, but you could go with someone like Drake London or Kyle Pitts or Cordero Patterson if he's healthy. Let's scroll down here a little bit to the Saints wide receivers next. Michael Thomas and Chris Olave. Now again, Michael Thomas did miss last week, so we will need to keep an eye on his injury status here for Sunday with that foot injury that he's dealing with, but assuming he plays, again, I love this matchup at home against Seattle. And him and Jameis Winston have shown some nice chemistry here early on in the year. Let's not forget, Michael Thomas missed all of last year. We can't discredit that. This guy might only get better as the season progresses. And then Chris Olave is a legit rookie, leading the NFL in air yards by over 200 yards, and that's largely due to Jameis Winston. That's why we're hoping he plays this week, because if he's going to be getting those deep shots here against Seattle, he could have another big game. 12, 17, and 27 DraftKings points here in his last 3 games. The targets have been there. Again, the air yards have been there, and found the end zone last week as well. You could do a little double stack there. Jameis Winston with Michael Thomas and Chris Olave. Run it back with someone like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, or Rashad Penny, who had his biggest game of the year last week against Detroit. Now let's scroll down here a little bit into the low 5K range / 4K range. Garrett Wilson did play more snaps and ran more routes than Corey Davis last week for the first time this year, so you do like to see that. However, Corey Davis did have a better game and found the end zone, still had 7 targets in that game, damn near 18.5 DraftKings points. And the chemistry between him and Zach Wilson, we saw it last year. Corey Davis averaged 6.5 targets per game with Zach Wilson last year. Seems to be on par here again this year. Really nice price at $5,100. And then one more guy that's sticking out to me here, assuming he does play this week and is healthy, Zay Jones at $4,100 is definitely a cash game consideration. I've talked about this in the past here. Week 1, he had an average depth of target around 10, 11 yards. In weeks 2 and weeks 3, we saw that come down to about 5.5 yards, and I like the volume he was seeing at this price in general. So, low-priced wide receiver play, definitely a cash game consideration in that matchup against Houston. Again, assuming he is healthy this week. And then we got the tight ends here. First thing you're probably going to notice, no Travis Kelce, no Mark Andrews, and no Darren Waller this week. So the top 3 we have here, or top 4 I shall say, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Zach Ertz, and Dallas Goedert. You can mix in Kyle Pitts there as well, but he has obviously underperformed this year. I think any one of those guys are fine in tournaments, but really the two that I like are Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert playing against one another. Like I said, I just like that game in general here this week. But let's actually get down to the low 4K range here. Tyler Higbee. There is a case to be made we should be playing this guy in cash. You can see the volume and targets are definitely there, and that's led to double-digit DraftKings points in 3 of 4 weeks. Not bad at all for a guy priced at $4,300. We can definitely consider him this week. Gerald Everett, I think that's another cash game consideration as well. Probably more of a tournament play, to be honest, but Justin Herbert is not afraid to look his way in the red zone, and a really nice price there at $4,200. Other side of that game, I think David Njoku is in consideration here at $3,800. 22 targets here in his last 3 games. Led to some solid production here on the DraftKings side of things. Tyler Conklin, I talked about him last week, wasn't entirely sure how he was going to be used in this offense with Zach Wilson back, and although his targets did come down from playing with Joe Flacco, still saw 5 targets last week, had 52 receiving yards, and still has a legit role in that offense. Dalton Schultz really sticks out to me here at this price at $3,400. Obviously, he missed week 3 with an injury and did absolutely nothing last week, but I can't remember the last time this guy was this cheap. Probably early last year. Obviously, he had a decent year last year. He was a top 5 tight end in fantasy scoring with Dak Prescott, obviously, and not Cooper Rush. But this is an interesting tournament play here. I wouldn't consider him in cash just because the volume hasn't been consistent, but $3,400 punt play on the tournament side of things, I definitely don't mind that. Will Dissly has now scored a touchdown here in 3 of 4 weeks. Hard for me to consider a guy like this who's only getting 3-4 targets per game, but seems to be used in the red zone. Nice price there at $3,300. And then Irv Smith here against Chicago, I don't mind that. Another cheap punt play, as well as Logan Thomas. So there's quite a few tight end plays this week in the low 4K range, 3K range, that I think we can consider in both cash and tournaments. But with the big 3 tight ends missing this week, again in Kelsey, Andrews, and Darren Waller, I think we can just pay down at this position. And then to wrap up the position-by-position plays here, we're going to go with the defenses. I'll keep this short and sweet. I think we could play the Bills here in our tournaments at $4,100, going up against Kenny Pickett in his first real start. I also think that the Jags are interesting here on the tournament side of things, playing at home against Houston. This Jags defense has been legit in all 4 games this year. Getting sacks, getting pressure, interception in every single game. I don't mind them at all, but on the cash side of things, the defense that's sticking out to me here is the Carolina Panthers. Had some solid games themselves so far this year, and Jimmy G just really doesn't scare me. I know they got Debo, I know they got Kittle, Jeff Wilson has looked good, but yeah, playing on the road here, going from the West Coast to the East Coast, yeah, I think I'm going to take the Panthers here at $2,600 as kind of my low price play. You know, maybe one of these other defenses will pop out to me here later on in the week. Cowboys, I don't mind them going against Matt Stafford, who keeps turning the ball over, but yeah, I'd say the Panthers right now at $2,600 are the defense that sticks out to me in the 2K range. All right, now everyone, let's go full circle here by putting together a first look cash lineup and first look tournament lineup. We'll start on the cash side of things here. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts seem like staple quarterbacks in my cash lineup this year. If they're going to remain in the low 8K range, I think we can play them once again this week. I love that matchup between Philadelphia and Arizona this week, but let's go with Josh Allen here. I think he could light up the Steelers, missing TJ Watt and Ahkello Witherspoon at home. Derrick Henry, man, on the running back side of things, I think we can consider him. Let's put him in there for now. If he's going to be getting 4 or 5 plus targets per game, $8,200, one of the best running backs in the league, I'll take that there. Let's go with Jamal Williams here again as well. 19, 20 plus rushing attempts in back-to-back games. Finds the end zone once. Not a bad price there at $6,500. And I'm going to put in one more running back here as well. Breece Hall, man. 16 rushing attempts last week. Still used in the passing game. I'm probably 50-50 on him being a cash game play right now. That's why it's an early look. But at $5,400 against Miami at home, I definitely don't mind it. Let's get to the wide receivers here. Chris Godwin did see 10 targets last game. Should just be used more going forward, assuming he is healthy. But coming off of that knee injury, and then he got banged up in week 1 with that hamstring injury. Nice to see him get that volume in his return. I just like that game in general in the Bucs against Atlanta. So let's put him in there for now. I think Chris Olave, I like him even more if Michael Thomas misses, but the volume has been there even with Michael Thomas in the lineup. I like that matchup. I like the home matchup especially. $5,700, very reasonable. And let's assume that Zay Jones plays here this week. Again, I talked about his average depth of target. Once that came down, we saw him have a really nice game in week 3 and a really nice price tag at $4,100 against the Houston Texans. We only got $3,000 left per player. Let's put in a defense. Let's just go to the Panthers there at $2,600. That gives us $3,400 left over for a tight end. We could go Irv Smith, Logan Thomas. I'm going to put in Irv Gotti there for the time being. That gives us $200 left over if we want to change any of these positions. Now, there are a few guys in this cash lineup here that I'm probably 50-50 about in my cash pool here on Tuesday. They might very well just be tournament plays, but I don't mind the way that this looks here. It's very volume dependent, and that's what we're looking for in our cash lineup. Now, let's put together a first look tournament lineup here as well, and I've talked about the Buccaneers quite a bit today, so let's go with Brady stacked up with 2 of his wide receivers. We'll go Mike Evans here and Chris Godwin. Love this matchup here for the Buccaneers, playing at home against Atlanta, divisional game, and I mentioned this earlier, even if Tampa gets out to an early lead in this game, I don't foresee them taking their foot off the pedal, being that they are 2-2 to start the season. Now let's go with a little running back defense stack here as well. I talked about James Robinson splitting carries with ETN last week. I think that could have been game script dependent, being that they were losing in that game, just getting ETN more involved in general. But let's say Robinson gets back to his old numbers here from the first 3 weeks, where he was damn near seeing close to 15, 20-plus rushing attempts per game. In any case, I do love the matchup there against Houston, and let's go with that defense as well. So we got the Jags D stacked up there with James Robinson. Now let's go with another 5K running back here. I love the matchup for Ramondre Stevenson. This Detroit defense cannot stop the run whatsoever. We saw Rashad Penny run all over them last week. Ramondre here getting double-digit rushing attempts in each of his last 2 games and 5+ targets as well. I really like that at that price. Now let's go with one of these wide receivers in the 6K range. I think a lot of people are going to be on Tyreek Hill this week, and rightfully so against that Jets defense. But I think Jalen Waddle could fly under the radar here at $6,700. Yeah, Teddy might look his way for some of those short intermediate routes, and Waddle doesn't need much to find the end zone, so I do like that. Let's go with a tight end here. Logan Thomas. I don't mind this here at $3,200. You can see the targets have been pretty consistent this year, and he's coming off an ACL injury, so he's only going to play more going forward. Obviously doesn't have great DraftKings numbers there. That's why he's priced at $3,200, but I do like that matchup there against that Tennessee defense. So that leaves us with $6,100 left over. We could go with someone like Devin Singletary here, Amari Cooper if we wanted to, Khalil Herbert, Drake London if you want to run it back. Let's just run it back here for the time being, but I kind of like Singletary there as well. But we could do a little game stack there between Atlanta and Tampa, basically saying, okay, we're running out Brady with Evans and Godwin, running it back there with Drake London. We got the stack with James Robinson and his defense, and then a few individual plays. Don't mind how that looks here early on in the week for a tournament lineup. All right, everyone, that is going to wrap up this video here for today. As always, thank y'all for taking the time out of your day to watch the content here on this channel. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Let's have ourselves a great week here, folks. I'm out of here.